huge step into where Martin Luther King would want us to be today. And I'll close there. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. Jump out the window.
So there you have it.
So there you have it.
So who are you going to have next? You want
I was going to do primarily and discuss Martin Luther King's role
Does anyone else want to say anything?
I would like to hear Dr. Johnson speak. So I was trying to introduce him, but he speaks for himself.
Yeah, I'll pick you up.
Okay. I'm going to make a brief comments, and I appreciate what's been said already. And I want to thank Marjorie and Anselm for pulling this together. I got the flyer about the Martin Luther King program. There's so many Martin Luther King programs. Yours was distinguished because it said we were going to look at, I don't know if it said the real Dr. King or how his legacy has been sanitized. Well, I don't remember, but I said, I got to make this,
This is what it says. The misrepresentations of Martin, Martin, a prisoner of conscience, the marginalization of Martin and black leadership.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you,
Those are
Anselm.
important topics, and that's actually something I had spoken about at different venues over the past few years, so it appealed to me, and so I wanted to be here for that. Also want to thank the establishment for hosting this. But I had two brief comments I wanted to make, and two brief topics I want to talk about. One is Marjorie was talking about how Dr. King was maligned very much in his day, even though he's celebrated out today. And people don't really pay attention to that or don't understand that as well. And I want to, I actually did a talk several years ago at Ethical Culture Society about the government surveillance of Martin Luther King and the fact that we needed to understand that was signed off by Bobby Kennedy, initially in the Kennedy administration. In fact, in Selma film, they sort of like protect the Kennedys and try to blame a lot of stuff on Johnson. But it was in the Kennedy administration when they originally signed off on surveillance of Dr. King. He was viewed as subversive. And there was all of this innuendo that maybe he was a communist or he was influenced by communists, even though he's a devout Christian and spoke against Marxism. If you read what he says, he spoke against Marxism, but still they were able to use that association to malign him. But I want to add to that is the history of African American freedom fighting in the United States. That not only have African Americans as a social group been criminalized, but African American resistance, African American advocacy for basic rights has been criminalized. And before the FBI existed in the United States, there was another organization, part of the government, I don't remember, it was the U.S. Intelligence Agency, I don't remember the title of it, but they begun surveillance and infiltration of Marcus Garvey's movement. And they actually hired agents, African-American agents, to infiltrate Garvey's movement to try to find information on him that they could use to prosecute him. And this activity was organized by a young man who was working for the government for this agency, which later became the FBI. And that man's name was J. Edgar Hoover. That's how J. Edgar Hoover got his start in intelligence. I use the real quotes around intelligence. He was personal intelligence through the infiltration of Garvey's movement and the active effort to subvert his movement, of which they were partially successful, to be frank. Though Marcus Garvey was very, very influential, and I'm not going to go into all that now. But what I want to say is that our struggle for full rights, and also our struggle to not only have rights but to transform the United States, has always been criminalized. And that continues to be an issue. And when we were brought here enslaved, as Anselm said a few minutes ago, it was against the law for somebody to teach us to read. Many white people risked legal prosecution for teaching slaves to read. It was against the law for us to travel in certain ways. It was against the law for us to raise our hands to defend ourselves if we were struck by a slave owner. So, the law has been used to suppress African American aspirations since we've been here. And then beyond, I'm not going to talk about all the links between Garvey and the other groups, Paul Robeson, who were also subjected to government surveillance and suppression, and many other local people whose names we don't remember, and so forth and so on. So I wanted to talk about that issue about government surveillance. The other issue I want to talk about, again, very briefly, and about Dr. King's legacy, and something that I find very instructive, is to try to do as much as we can to resurrect Dr. King's anti-Vietnam War speech in 1967 at Riverside Church. And I would hope that in the next generation, as many people know about that speech as know about the I Have a Dream speech. And I believe that what he lays out in that speech in terms of the critique of the U.S. militarism, not only in Vietnam but around the world, the United States presents itself as being the home of the free and the land. What is it? The free world. Land of the brave.
Home of the tree and the land of the slave. DJ said.
Has military installations all around the world, military troops, and they're not. I don't believe that they're all for defense.
Of course.
The United States is the greatest. Martin Luther King said, "What? The greatest purveyor of violence in the world."
Right.
So you have the militarization of the United States. You also have the arms industry. There's so many people make so much money from making instruments to kill people in the United States, and it comes out of the United States. And the United States says we're defending ourselves, but all of the other militaries in the world don't equal what the United States has. So this is very important. Now, in our current era, just like during King's era, they used the specter of Marxism or communism to malign his effort and our effort in terms of civil rights. Nowadays, more recently, they use terrorism to justify and to create fear and to support U.S. militarism around the world. And if you read Dr. King's speech from Riverside Church, he lays it out. I mean, he's so clear. He's so clear. So that's something I would recommend to people. I actually think I might have sent a copy of it to Marjorie recently.
Yes.
But I'd like people to look at that and keep in mind, I think he was assassinated exactly 1 year after he made that speech. He made that speech, I think, April 4th, 1967, and he was assassinated in 1968. Yeah. So I think those are the two lines of currents I want to talk about: militarism and the government surveillance. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. That's Dr. Johnson. Does anyone else have anything quick? We know that Mrs. Joanna Wright has joined us. We do want to acknowledge you. Mrs. Joanna Wright.
Is she a doctor also?
She's a doctor of sports, I can tell you.
And as well as Abdul Rowe.
Yeah. So we're just going to continue.
Yeah, I would like to open up the conversation. Abdul, you have something to say?
Abdul.
I know he's over there chowing down at this breakfast at the rack here.
Yeah, by the way, this program is being broadcast live on the South Orange Report Online Radio Experience. So just to give you a caveat, it is being broadcast live.
And will be rebroadcast.
First, I want to thank everyone for inviting me, and I want to thank Margaret and Ansel for having this great program on this morning. A lot of times, when this day comes around, I sometimes look at it with a bit of angst, because the programs that are geared toward the memory of Dr. King around the country sometimes have been really, I would say, not complete.
Sanitized.
What a kind word. I would try to be kind for the audience. But I think this particular forum offers a much more in-depth analysis of Dr. King. It's really funny. My wife and I last night went to see Selma. I was reluctant myself to go see it because, frankly, I'm sort of worn of seeing movies that portray the civil rights era as only in a very limited fashion as how the movement took place in the South. And even that has been limited to some extent. But I have to say that not giving any credit to the movie Selma per se, but at least it did show that Dr. King, in a much more nuanced fashion, in terms of some of the speeches he gave, his thinking, his strategies, his approaches to how best to, as an organizer, as a leader, as an inspirer, behind the scenes. Your point with respect to Dr. King's position on the Vietnam War in his last, at least what I would consider to be his most famous speech, his speech at Riverside Church. I would invite, anybody who's, especially the young people. I think the young people have the thrust. I think they have the pulse on history. But sometimes, and some of us who lived through it, I would invite them to examine, Dr. King's legacy and his speeches and his philosophy beyond the mere "I have a dream" speech. The letters from Birmingham jail, his speech at Riverside Church about why he opposed the Vietnam War, was something of such profound significance. I learned a newfound respect for him. Although I must admit, for the sake of public disclosure, while I admired Dr. King even then, and I still admire him now, I was more of a student and follower of Malcolm and his approach. I respected Dr. King. I respect him even more now because, having understood and studied the breadth of his contributions and his thinking, he was an evolving figure. He was considered safe, even though he was seen as a quote unquote dangerous person by certain powers in the government. But as long as he wasn't speaking out against international issues and economic issues, he was considered safe by the public and the masses. When he began to break out and allow his moral consciousness to evolve to more than just mere quote-unquote civil rights, but human rights and economic rights, that's when he became a danger. And not just to the quote-unquote white powers that be. Many in the black community abandoned him. Many of the black leadership abandoned him. Many of the black churches, those who even worked with him before, abandoned him. And only after his passing, those same hypocrites, if I may call them that, began to embrace him and lionize him. So we have to I think it's important that we look at the breadth of history and re-examine it. Not from a quote unquote, and be revisionist with respect to new knowledge and new insights. Because now he's sanitized, now he's safe, now he's been marginalized to 4 words: I have a dream. That's it. And I found that highly problematic and highly disrespectful to his legacy. So this forum that we're having and this radio broadcast that we're having, I think it's very, very essential, and I congratulate you all, and I wish all of you support and good wishes and Godspeed in this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. And I must say that this is something that I am passionate about. I live in this community of South Orange and Maplewood, and as they say that, I say this on my show all the time, I don't have a dog in this fight, but I'm a resident of South Orange and Maplewood, and I love this community. And in this community, we tend to tout diversity quite a bit. We talk about diversity quite a bit, and I'm going to say this. We talk about diversity. If you talk to anyone that lives in South Orange and Maplewood, they're going to tell you 2 top reasons why I moved to South Orange and Maplewood. And one of those are going to be diversity. Right? They may also talk about the train station, they may talk about the school, but diversity is so important. Okay? However,